I pulled into my son's driveway that Christmas morning, heart full of joy and anticipation. Snow was falling gently, the air crisp with winter chill, and I had wrapped the presents myself, each carefully chosen over months of planning. But when I knocked on the door, the words I never expected tore through me. "Oh, we weren't really expecting you for Christmas." I froze. My hands trembled on the doorknob. Not expecting me? After everything I had done for him? Every sleepless night? Every sacrifice? Every dollar I had saved to help him build a life? He could say that to me? Inside, his wife smiled politely, as if I were a stranger who had arrived uninvited. My own son, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the man I had taught to walk, talk, and dream, didn't hug me. He didn't even step forward. He let the words hang in the air like a frozen blade. In that moment, I realized the truth. Sometimes those we love most take us for granted. And sometimes we have to remind them what it means to be family.
I was just a young man when I first became a father. I had little to give, but everything I had. My hands, my heart, my determination. I worked long hours in the factory, sometimes until my shoulders ached, and spent nights fixing odd jobs just to ensure my son had clothes on his back, shoes on his feet, and books in his hands. I believed that love wasn't measured by words alone, but by the silent sacrifices made day after day. I remember the first Christmas I truly saved for him. I had clipped coupons, skipped meals, and wrapped every little gift with trembling hands. When he tore through the paper and smiled, I felt wealthier than any king, richer than anyone with a vault of gold. That smile, that laughter, it was all I ever wanted. As he grew, I stayed by his side, teaching him to ride his bike, to respect others, and to be honest. I stayed late at work so he could attend his school plays. I came home exhausted, yet I never complained. Every effort was a building block for the man I hoped he would become. When he bought his first house, I felt a quiet pride, not because I needed recognition, but because I knew the sweat of my youth had given him a foundation. That house was more than bricks and wood. It was a symbol of my labor, my hopes, and my love. Christmas was always my favorite time. I remember decorating the tree with him as a child, wrapping gifts with his tiny hands helping me, the smell of pine needles in the living room, and the warmth of hot cocoa after a snowy day. I imagined that one day he would carry these traditions forward, remembering not just the presents, but the love behind them. But as he grew older, life began to pull us apart. Work, marriage, responsibilities, they changed him. I watched from a distance as he focused on building a life of his own, becoming engrossed in bills, trips, and the opinions of others. I didn't mind. A parent's heart is supposed to stretch, to let go, to allow children to make mistakes. I trusted that the values I had instilled in him would guide him even when I wasn't there. Then came his wife. At first, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. I thought if my son loves her, then she must be good for him. But over time, it became clear that her priorities were different. Luxury mattered more than family, appearances more than respect. I said nothing, hoping my son would stand firm, hoping he would remember the sacrifices I had made for him. Yet, I soon realized that the lessons I taught him as a boy were fading. His decisions no longer reflected the values of kindness, patience, and love I tried to instill. The house he owned, the comfort I had helped him build, was slowly becoming secondary to indulgence and self-interest. Still, I held hope. I believed that love could remind him of the truth, that family isn't about wealth nor convenience, but about connection, respect, and gratitude. And every Christmas, I tried again. I baked cookies, wrapped gifts, and drove to his home, dreaming of shared laughter and warm embraces, hoping that he would remember what it meant to be family. That hope was shattered the morning he told me I wasn't expected for Christmas. Every memory, every late night, every holiday I had worked to make special came crashing down. My sacrifices, my love, all taken for granted. And in that instant, I knew that sometimes even the closest blood ties are not enough to guarantee respect. I sat in my car that day, staring at the house he had built, feeling both anger and sorrow. I remembered every winter night spent shoveling snow off his driveway. Every evening I spent comforting him when he was sick. Every penny I had saved to ensure he had more than I ever did. And yet, when it mattered most, when the world should have been warm with family, I was told I wasn't expected. That moment, that cold dismissal, planted a seed of decision inside me, a quiet resolve to remind him in a way he could never ignore what it truly means to be a parent and what it costs to take one for granted.
I stepped inside his house that Christmas morning, carrying gifts wrapped with care and hope. The smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air, but the warmth I expected from family was nowhere to be found. My son sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, barely glancing up. His wife, polished and poised, offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. We weren't really expecting you for Christmas," he said casually, as if it were some small, harmless fact. I froze. My hands tightened around the shopping bags. Not expecting me? After everything I had done for him? Every night I stayed awake worrying? Every penny I saved so he could live comfortably? This is how I was greeted? I wanted to speak, to remind him of the sacrifices, of the nights I went hungry so he could eat, of the winters I worked in the freezing cold to keep him warm. But his words had cut deeper than I could have imagined. His wife leaned forward, her eyes scanning the room like she owned it. "Well, we didn't want to ruin your day by dropping in unannounced," she said, her tone more mocking than polite. I looked at my son, waiting for him to correct her, waiting for him to show a flicker of loyalty or gratitude. But he didn't. He lowered his eyes and said nothing. The betrayal burned hotter than the fire in the hearth. He had become a stranger in his own home, his loyalties swayed by convenience and fear of conflict. Over the next few days, I watched them treat my home as if it were theirs. The Christmas decorations I had carefully brought were dismissed. The tree I had spent hours decorating was poked and prodded, its ornaments criticized for being outdated. One afternoon, his wife said, "We could just ask him to let us stay longer. He doesn't really use this house much, right?" His son chuckled, agreeing silently. "Yeah, he won't mind. He's always soft-hearted." I felt a cold fury rise in my chest. Soft-hearted? Soft-hearted enough to let me be mocked? Soft-hearted enough to ignore every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every Christmas I had spent making him feel loved? Dinner was worse. They complained about the food, the table setting, and even the way I had arranged the chairs. I wanted to shout, to tell them they had no right, that they were standing on the labor of my life. But instead, I remained silent. I watched, I observed, and recorded every word and every look.
Their betrayal was not just in their actions, it was in their expectation. They believed they could take everything I had built without a thought, without a nod to the years I had poured into them. That night, I sat alone by the fire, the gifts untouched, the laughter I had imagined replaced by cold silence. I realized that this Christmas, I would have to teach a lesson they could never forget, not out of spite, but out of necessity. They had forgotten the value of family, the meaning of sacrifice, and the true cost of love. And I knew that if I did nothing, the cycle of disrespect would continue, and my son would learn nothing, not from me, not from life. The betrayal had been delivered with casual words, but its sting would echo for years. And in that echo, I began to plan, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a firm resolve to remind them what it truly means to be family.
That night, as the snow fell softly against the window, I sat alone by the dying fire. The house, once full of warmth and love, now felt like a stranger's place. My son's laughter echoed faintly from upstairs, mixed with his wife's voice, sharp, dismissive, full of plans that never once included me. I sat with my old hands folded, staring at the flickering flames. Every ember reminded me of a memory, the nights I had stayed up sewing patches into his school uniform, the long hours at work to pay his tuition, the winter mornings I walked through ice just to bring bread to the table. And now I was not expected, cast aside like an afterthought. But I wasn't angry. No, anger fades. What I felt was something deeper, a quiet sorrow mixed with clarity. They believed my sacrifices were endless, that I would always give and never stop no matter how poorly they treated me. I thought of the mortgage, the very roof above their heads. Every month I had been the silent guardian, paying the lion's share, ensuring they had a home, ensuring my grandchildren would one day have a place of stability. They thought it was their achievement, their pride. They never asked how those payments were managed. They never wondered how, after retirement, I still had the means to support them. But I knew the truth. Without me, without my steady hand, that home would crumble under the weight of its debt. I leaned back in my chair and whispered into the empty room. Perhaps it's time you learn what happens when you forget the hand that held you. The decision settled on my shoulders like a heavy coat, but it also brought relief. For too long, I had shouldered their burdens while they treated me like an inconvenience. This wasn't punishment. It was awakening. The next morning, I rose early. My son and his wife were still asleep. I brewed my coffee slowly, letting the aroma fill the kitchen, the same kitchen I had helped remodel, though no one ever mentioned my name. Then, with steady hands, I took out my old folder of documents, bank statements, mortgage slips, receipts with my signature, proof of every sacrifice they thought had magically disappeared into thin air. I placed the folder into my worn leather bag, the same one I had carried to work for 40 years, and as I zipped it shut, I felt a strange peace. Later that day, I called the bank. My voice was calm, deliberate. Yes, I would like to cancel the automatic mortgage payments connected to my account, effective immediately. There was a pause on the line. Sir, Are you certain? This will transfer full responsibility to the listed owners of the property. I closed my eyes, imagining my son's face when he realized. His arrogance, his wife's smugness, all built on the foundation I had quietly maintained. Yes, I said firmly, I am certain. When I hung up, my hands trembled, not from doubt, but from the weight of the moment. For years, I had been their safety net. Now, I was stepping aside, letting them feel the ground beneath their feet. That evening, I joined them for dinner. They chatted idly about vacations, new furniture, and parties. They didn't notice the calm in my eyes and the quiet smile on my lips. They had no idea the course of their lives had just shifted. And in that silence, I made peace with my decision. I wasn't cutting them off out of hatred. I was giving them the most important gift of all, the chance to grow, to face reality, to finally learn gratitude. They may not see it now. They may even curse my name when the bills arrive. But one day, they would understand. For the first time in years, I slept soundly.
It was 2 weeks after Christmas when the storm broke. I was sitting in my chair, the same armchair I had bought with my first paycheck decades ago, when my phone rang. My son's voice burst through the line, loud and panicked. "Dad, did you forget to make the mortgage payment this month? They're saying it hasn't been received." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. The storm had arrived right on time. "No, son," I said quietly. "I didn't forget." There was a pause. Then his wife's voice in the background, sharp and shrill. "Ask him again. He must have made a mistake. He always pays it." My son's tone hardened. "Dad, what do you mean you didn't forget?" "I mean," I said, steady as stone, "that I stopped. From now on, the house is yours, fully yours. The mortgage, the bills, the weight of responsibility, all of it." Silence. For a moment, the only sound was the shallow breathing on the other end. Then came the explosion. "Are you kidding me? After everything? You can't just stop! Do you know what this means?" His voice cracked, not from anger alone, but from fear. Behind him, his wife's voice shouted, "Tell him he can't do this! Tell him we'll lose the house!" I held the phone closer, my voice calm, almost a whisper. "You told me I wasn't expected for Christmas. You made it clear I was no longer part of your family's life. Well, I'm honoring your words. You will stand on your own now." My son's breathing grew ragged. He was no longer the child I remembered, but a man cornered by his own arrogance. "Dad, please, don't do this. We can't afford it. We've spent. There's no money left." I almost felt pity. Almost. "Do you know why you had the luxury to spend? Why can you buy vacations, clothes, furniture, without worrying? It was because I was carrying the weight for you, quietly, silently, every month, without thanks, without even acknowledgement. You lived as though the roof above your head was earned by your effort alone. But the truth, son, the truth is, I gave you that roof." His wife's voice pierced again, venomous this time. "So what? He's your father. Isn't that what parents are supposed to do?"
Something in me snapped, but not in anger, in clarity. No, I said firmly. Parents give until they can give no more. But children must one day learn to stand, to honor, to remember where they came from. I was not put on this earth to be your endless servant. On the other end, I heard a crash, perhaps a glass thrown in rage, perhaps the weight of realization setting in. My son's voice returned, quieter now, almost trembling. Dad, please, don't do this. We'll lose everything. I let out a long breath, my heart both heavy and light. You won't lose everything. You'll lose the illusion that life is free. You'll lose the arrogance that blinded you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll gain something far greater. Respect, humility, gratitude. The line went silent. I imagined his face, pale, stunned, his wife's fury beside him. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small or forgotten. I felt strong. The next week, the bank notices began to arrive at their house. Neighbors whispered about arguments heard late into the night. My son, once proud and carefree, was seen pacing outside, his shoulders hunched under a weight he had never carried before. He called me again, late one evening, his voice broken. Dad, I didn't know. I didn't know you were the one paying all this time. I thought I was doing it. I closed my eyes, and tears welled. You didn't know because you never asked. You never wanted to know. You only wanted to take. For the first time, I heard silence from him that wasn't arrogance or anger. It was shame. And that silence was worth more than any gift, any apology. It was the sound of truth finally breaking through.
The weeks after the confrontation was strangely quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied to their home, their burdens, or their demands. My mornings were filled with silence, not the heavy silence of rejection, but the gentle quiet of peace. I tended to my little garden out back, brushing the frost off the last of the winter cabbages. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke. It reminded me of simpler times, back when my wife was alive and our children ran through the grass with laughter in their throats. Back when Christmas meant crowded tables, warm food, and tired but joyful hearts. Those memories came to me like old photographs, faded but precious. I realized I had spent so much of my later years trying to buy back those feelings with money, with sacrifice, with silence. But love doesn't return when you purchase it. Love has to live and breathe on its own. One cold afternoon, a knock came at my door. It wasn't my son. It wasn't his wife. It was my neighbor, Martha, a widow herself, who had often brought me warm bread in the winter. She stood with a pie in her hands and a shy smile. "I heard about what happened," she said softly. "If you ever need company, you're always welcome with us." Her words, though simple, wrapped around my heart like a blanket. They were a reminder that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is kindness, chosen freely, given without expectation. Meanwhile, my son's life unraveled. The bank notices piled higher. His wife, who once walked through stores with shopping bags swinging from her arms, now screamed in public when her credit cards were declined. The neighbors no longer admired them, they pitied them. And worse, they whispered. Pride, once their armor, had become their humiliation. I saw my son once more months later. He came alone, his face thinner, his shoulders bent. He stood on my porch like a boy again, though his hair was streaked with gray. "Dad," he began, his voice breaking, "we lost the house." I studied him quietly. No anger rose in me, only a deep, aching sadness. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and tears filled his eyes. I didn't realize how much you did. I thought you'd always carry it. I thought I had time to make things right." For a moment, I wanted to embrace him, to tell him it would be all right. But then I remembered Christmas, the cold words, the rejection, the laughter behind me when I walked away, and I knew some lessons must be carried, not erased. "You have time still," I said quietly, "but you must build, not take. You must honor, not demand. That is the only way forward." He nodded, broken, and left without asking for more. For once, he carried his own weight. The years slipped by and my health declined. My hands, once strong, grew frail. My breath came shorter each winter. I knew my time was near. I wrote my will in silence. The house I lived in, modest but warm, I left not to my son, but to Martha, the neighbor who had brought me kindness when I was forgotten. I asked her in return to keep the garden blooming, to let the earth continue to give life. To my son, I left only a letter. It read, "My dear boy, I gave you years of my strength, and you gave me years of silence. I carried you when you could have walked beside me. This house, this legacy, could have been yours if respect had lived in your heart. Instead, it goes to someone who gave without asking. Remember this: love cannot be bought, and inheritance cannot be demanded. What remains with you is not property, memory. May you learn before it is too late that respect is the only true inheritance a child can give a parent." When I finally passed, Martha honored my wish. She kept the garden alive, planting roses along the fence and tomatoes in the soil. She spoke kindly of me to her children and grandchildren who visited often. My name lived in their home, not as a ghost of bitterness, but as a story of gratitude. And my son? He came to the funeral, dressed in a suit too worn at the edges. He stood at the back, his wife nowhere in sight. His eyes were hollow, but they glistened with unshed tears. He didn't speak, didn't argue, didn't demand. He only watched, perhaps realizing too late what he had lost. Not money, not property, but a father's love that could have been his anchor. As the earth closed over me, the truth echoed louder than any argument. I was not forgotten. I was not small. I was a man who gave, who loved, and who finally chose dignity over silence. And though my son was left with regret, I left this world with peace.
My story is not just about money. It is about respect, a respect that every parent deserves. We give our children the best years of our lives. We work with tired hands and sleepless nights so they can stand taller than we ever did. But when age bends our backs and weakens our steps, too many forget the sacrifices that built their lives. If you are a son, a daughter, or even an in-law, remember this. Love is not measured in gifts or grand gestures. It is measured in presence, in kindness, in honor. Never let pride silence you. Never let convenience blind you, because once a parent is gone, no apology can be spoken to the grave. And to those who have been mocked, ignored, or cast aside, stand firm. Do not let disrespect steal your dignity. Sometimes love means giving, and sometimes it means walking away. In the end, true justice is not in what we leave behind, but in the lessons our absence teaches. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Take a moment to reflect on the people who sacrificed for you. And if you want more heartfelt stories like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps keep these stories alive and reminds the world that respect, love, and family still matter. Thank you for watching, and remember, some lessons should never be learned too late.